Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to give this talk. I'm Sergei Guriev, Chief Economist of European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is a multilateral development bank working in 3 continents, mostly in post-communist countries, but now not only. And so what I wanted to talk about was the relationship between SDGs. Please raise your hands who know what SDGs are. Who knows how many? How many indicators to measure success on 17 SDGs? No, 240. There is actually no single response to that question anyway. So I'll talk a little bit about what SDGs are and why we need innovation to deliver on SDGs. Then I'll talk about barriers and binding constraints for delivering on SDGs. Then I'll talk about 2 specific issues where blockchain can contribute to achieving SDGs on these specific risks and constraints. When I'm going to talk about blockchain, I will mostly use that blockchain in the name only, like Nouriel referred to you. I also wanted to talk about what blockchain can do and cannot do in finance, but actually I will just skip that subject, and I will just say I fully agree with Alex and with Nouriel 100%. And if you have questions about that, Alex and myself, we can defend our position once again, but let me not waste time on this because you've heard all these very convincing arguments. So what are the SDGs? We have Agenda 2030, 17 SDGs, talking about poverty, equality, environment, social goals, and so on and so forth. And the simple number is that the estimate for investment in developing countries to achieve those SDGs by 2030 is something like $2.5 trillion per year. So how much do we have in terms of ODA, official development aid, per year? 1 trillion? No. Half a trillion? No. The total number is something like 140, 150 billion per year. So we have an order of magnitude problem. And the only way to address this problem is actually to bring in private money, to crowd in private money to invest with the impact to deliver on SDGs. And private money is, of course, out there. There are pension funds ranging for tens of trillions of dollars. There are also impact investors. They're still not there, but they want to be there. And overall, if you think about that, it would be normal if capital would flow from rich to poor countries. Moreover, it would be normal if capital would flow from aging to younger economies. Aging economies have more savings. Young economies actually have less capital. Again, in countries with less capital, we have lower returns to capital, so it makes sense to move it from countries with abundant capital to countries with less capital. This is not happening. Why? We at EBRD, we know why, because our business model is exactly about achieving development impact through crowding in private capital. So in every project, we struggle exactly with the same set of problems. What are these problems? There is no rocket science in here. Bad governance, which means corruption, red tape, wrong policies, suboptimal regulation, macroeconomic instability, which is something that we talked about. Also, lack of infrastructure and underdeveloped human capital. Now, which of these constraints are truly exogenous and truly endogenous? We just had this G20 eminent persons group. There was a special task force presided by Singaporean Deputy Minister Tharman, which worked for a year and presented its findings in October. And the basic takeaway from the work of that group is the main constraints are governance, institutions, political and economic institutions, and human capital. If you have governance and human capital in place, infrastructure will follow, and good policies, of course, would follow as well. Why human capital stands out? Because human capital is actually a long-term project. You cannot educate your labor force in a year. You can build a lot of bridges over the course of 5 or 10 years. And in some countries, we see that happening. But it's very hard to educate the whole of your labor force in a period of 5 or 10 years. Well, you need professors, and professors take a long time to train. So on, sorry. That was a, yeah, okay, sorry. So how can blockchain help address these 2 issues? So first and foremost, of course, it's governance. The countries which are poor today have generally bad governance, and we at EBRD know it even better because in our case, countries have disproportionately bad governance compared to other emerging markets, to other developing countries, to countries with the same level of income. So we know how hard it is to work in countries with high corruption and bad political institutions. So what can we do? In those countries, of course, what is missing is market infrastructure. In those countries, what is missing is trust in government, and for a good reason. I'll give you an example. Some of you probably know that, but for example, in Moldova, a country with a $6 billion annual GDP, there was a banking scandal where they stole $1 billion from 3 banks. So about the whole country would be working for free for a couple of months because of this theft. It's not only Moldova. Better managed country, better run countries like Baltic states also have had their share of money laundering scandals, unfortunately in some cases with the help of Western counterparts. So how do you address this issue when you don't trust the government? Well, here blockchain, whatever you call blockchain in the name only, where you have permissioned, non-anonymous, but kind of checks and balance based system where you can actually have different parties checking on each other, not trusting one centralized authority which may be corrupt but also incompetent. This kind of approach may help you to create registries, to support financial transactions, to actually monitor quality of impact measurement. In what way? So suppose you say, well, I'm issuing green bonds. Who is going to check whether your green bonds are actually green? Who is going to check whether proceeds from the bond issuance are going in the direction you promised to your investors? That is where blockchain, again, non-anonymous, verified, certified, is a measure, is a possibility to measure the impact. Some of that is already happening. Here you can go to a session where Walmart will tell you a story how they use IBM blockchain platform to verify the sourcing of the food to responsible farming. And more of that will probably happen, especially in the countries where you cannot trust the government, which is unfortunately sometimes not very efficient, but also sometimes quite corrupt, trust to deliver on this. So let me also say that this is almost a public good in the sense that blockchain working like this can provide registry of land ownership. This is one of the countries where we work in, is trying to build pretty much land registry based on blockchain. It is also something that can provide a platform for registering financial transactions. And a lot of people would say it cannot work. How can multiple parties agree to check on each other and to run a platform with multiple parties? There are many models in economics that can tell you that it may actually work. But I think what is even more convincing is Wikipedia works and open source software also works. So GitHub, for example, works. This is not a public anonymous blockchain. This is a blockchain where you know each participant and you know that they have their identities, but still it works and it works reasonably well. Now let me say a few words about human capital. What can blockchain do for human capital? One thing is, of course, verification of skills and career track record. So if you hire as many people as we do in a big international organization, you know that not every resume or self-provided resume is trustworthy. People sometimes forget to mention negative facts on their resume. They also sometimes inflate certain achievements. And this is where, of course, blockchain, again, non-anonymous, verified and certified participants blockchain can actually help. You want to investigate what happened with your employment, the previous employer, you can call the boss and then the employee would say, this boss doesn't like me, you shouldn't trust this previous boss of mine. But if you have a blockchain solution, when you have several people saying, well, that was the boss who was right, or that was the employee who was right, that is a bit better because you have diversified checks and balances. That, of course, creates opportunities for almost virtually generating individual portable reputation, right? Your human capital becomes actually measurable and portable, And that is especially important for people who move cross-border, which is going to increase. We'll have more migration, and unfortunately, not just economic migration, but also refugees. And if you have digital identities, which include not only your fingerprints or your credit history, but also your employment achievements and your skills measured by your former colleagues or former clients or former bosses, that creates, of course, opportunities for getting to labor market in a new country faster. So let me actually say that overall, I believe that whatever happens will have much more transparency. And this is where, whether we like it or not, many systems will eventually be hackable. We have examples of that already in developed countries. We have wealth tax declarations eventually pointing at how much Swedes or Danes or Norwegians own. And I think that eventually will happen in all the countries. And whatever we say that whether centralized or decentralized decisions are more likely to be hacked, I think, unfortunately, there will be capable hackers who will try to get our data, whatever happens. But overall, I would say that whether we like it or not, the challenge of SDGs is actually huge. So we in development finance see that 2030 is actually just around the corner. SDGs are very hard to deliver on, and we need all the help we can get. And these examples of blockchain I mentioned, and I can mention many more, is this help that can actually help us deliver on those SDGs by 2030. Thank you very much.
So, who's going to be next?
Why don't I go so that because I may have to cut off. I do have a couple of ideas for you. I agree completely that trust, transparency, and then I'd add free markets are what make a government great. And if you have a population that doesn't trust its people, it doesn't trust its government, they will be a very poor country because they will not try to build great things. But if there's trust and transparency, and then there are free markets, countries do extraordinarily well. And then the other, but I have an idea for you, which is something that was tried a lot amongst developers, but then was sort of slapped down by the SEC, or by lawyers who were interpreting the SEC's actions. Is an airdrop, and a great way to provide aid to people who are suppressed by their government, as long as they have smartphones, is to do an airdrop, a crypto airdrop. You can airdrop Bitcoin. You can airdrop another currency that any country might want to work with. A lot of those very poor countries who have very bad, corrupt governments also have horrible currencies. The Nigerian naira, for instance, the Venezuelan, is it a peso? No, it's bolivar. A lot of these currencies have very corrupt governments, and you really want to bypass the government when you provide the aid. And one way to do it is to do an airdrop. And it's kind of funny because my dad was a part of the Berlin airdrop, where they were keeping people from dying of starvation in the war. They airdropped food. Well, now you can airdrop currency. And I think it's probably the best way, if you're just providing straight aid, straight financial aid to a population. I think an airdrop might just really change the way we all do our aid. and we don't have to work through the corrupt politicians. You know that, I don't know. I don't know exactly what the number is, but my guess is that 50% of the aid ends up in the hands of some corrupt politician. So it'll get you part the way to your goal. And, you've got a goal of 2.5 trillion a year, and you give away 140 billion in aid, but half of that is given away to corrupt politicians. You got an opportunity to pretty much double your aid just by putting it in airdrops. I love what these currencies are doing for the underdeveloped countries. It's we have a company called BitPesa and they're in Africa, but they're also moving to Indonesia and a couple of other countries, continents. And what they've done is they've made it so that you can easily transmit currencies across borders in these underdeveloped countries, whereas often if you're going to transfer something like a naira for whatever the Tanzanian government uses, you usually give away about 25%, and with this, it's almost frictionless. So I think that there are some really interesting opportunities. Oh, and if a currency is of course, Bitcoin's dropped pretty significantly over the last year, but if a currency pretty much drops consistently by 30% a year due to inflation or just bad governance, there's an interesting opportunity there. I had a guy come to me, Sebastian Serrano, and he wanted to start a Bitcoin company. He was in Argentina. And I said, but, Bitcoin's got this volatile price thing. I mean, do people really want to do business in Bitcoin? And he said, well, my family has lost its fortune 3 times in my life, and I'm only 30 years old. So every decade, the Argentinian government, through a corrupt system or through just mismanagement or through inflation or whatever, has kind of thrown their currency out so that people had to start over. So Bitcoin, as volatile as it is, turned out to be a much more stable currency for these people to operate under. And it's global, so they can move it across to Uruguay or to wherever else. This is really an exciting time, and I think it will lift all of the poorer countries of the world because we can have an alternative currency for them that is not tied to some political force. People call it fiat money. I call it political money, and I think we're better off in all aid, doing all the aid that we do. I think we should always be thinking in terms of how can we do this through crypto, and how can we do it better through crypto. So I hope that helps your thinking. I do love the thinking around trust and transparency in a government, because I think that is the difference between that and a free market is the difference between a very wealthy society and a very poor one.
Thank you, Tim. You're welcome to stay or switch off whenever you like.
Yeah. I'll stay for another 5 minutes.
Okay, Laura, what is your view?
So first of all, I really want to underscore the significance of the opening remarks here, because the SDGs are really what this panel is about, and how best to mobilize what needs to be a tremendous amount of private capital in directions which have a lot of risk. And I thought the underscoring of the particular risk was really interesting, because there are lots of risks in moving into to try to handle the most disadvantaged populations in the most disadvantaged places in the world. That's what the SDGs are about. They're about trying to make sure we do that, whether it's in health or education or training or gender equality or living wage. I mean, there are just a very large number of indicators, and the most careful work on this does suggest that we're going to have to depend significantly on private capital. So I asked the question, and I don't think we know the answer, but I will pose the question this way. How does blockchain technology, and I will talk about blockchain, not crypto. I think blockchain is a technology that enables crypto, but I think blockchain is a technology which actually can enable other things as well. So I'm going to talk about blockchain. And I think we as development economists, or we as companies thinking about going into these settings, need to think about what role could blockchain play in reducing the risk. There are other things. I mean, Nouriel, so one of the things that's very confusing to me, I'm a relative newcomer into this space. One of the confusing things to me is people go back and forth between fintech and blockchain and crypto without any distinction. I mean, half the time what I hear, people are talking about fintech, which is actually, that's what M-Pesa is. M-Pesa is fintech, okay? It's a brilliant, brilliant application of fintech. It was interesting enough, this is an important little history of this. It was financed initially by a research grant from DFID, that is the public agency in the UK for funding international economic development. It was picked up by British Telecom. British Telecom ended up working with Safaricom. It ended up being a private entity, okay? But it's a very interesting example of funding by DFID in this case, which is actually a great organization in terms of funding technological change with application to developing countries, but then passing it off to a private entity. But it's a fintech application. So I just want to say what I'm going to do in further discussions of this is always ask people, will you be very specific with me about why you're using the term blockchain if you're using it? So that's the first point. The second point is I happen to be, so I'm relatively new to this space, and I want to say that one of the reasons I'm in the space at all is because one of the companies mentioned here today, a permission, for-profit, private financial services entity, Ripple, ended up funding, I think it's now up to nearly 20 universities around the world to do research on blockchain. Both a very wide range of research, from continuing research on the highly technical issues of making the system work more efficiently, more rapid, all the way to SEC applications or to legal applications and thinking about it. So Ripple itself is making significant financial contributions to support the development of thinking about blockchain applications. And one of the things that a lot of scholars are interested in is thinking about it in terms of SDGs. So thank you, Ripple, and I think there are universities around the world and young people around the world who are going to be financed in part by grants to help do that research. I want to say also Ripple, and this is not an ad for Ripple, but this is why I'm here, has done a very interesting work with Stanford, and I'm from Berkeley, so you could see that I'm not just representing Berkeley or Ripple. Ripple Works, which is the foundation part of Ripple, financed a very interesting survey in the United States. It came out last year sometime, sort of looking at a number, I think they had about 149 blockchain projects, initiatives, for-profit pilots, profit companies, nonprofits working on social impact. So I think it's actually interesting to just see what is the case. So first of all, we've heard this again and again. here, and I would just underscore this, we are in very early days. If you're a pessimist like Nouriel, my friend Nouriel, you think the pessimism of today is going to last. If you're like Mr. Draper, you think we're going to just explode out. So I just say we don't know. Most of the things that showed up in this survey were really young. They were started in 2016, 2017. They're still very small. None of them have achieved any scale whatsoever. They're still assessing impact, because how could you assess impact after a year of activity? So there's a lot of interesting things going on. The evidence we don't have to really say yet, well, this one is clear. We do have evidence on M-Pesa. That's fintech. We actually have evidence on PayPal. I just want to say, while we were sitting here in Davos this week, PayPal basically introduced overnight, within a couple of days, a small loan, small working capital capability for workers in the US government who are now missing 2 paychecks. Okay? They just introduced it. Okay? And they could do that. That is a scaled operation. They do a third now of all small working capital loans for small and medium-sized firms. Well, why couldn't that work in a developing context? Is there some, can we get around the corruption? Can we get, do they have the human capital? They certainly have the internet.
But this is fintech. This is not blockchain.
Right, I know,
Just
but
fintech.
essentially, I think we need to think about all of these things together and sort of say, when is a particular blockchain application, maybe in support of a fintech, maybe alongside it. Anyway, let me just say something about where, so these are all young organizations. So where are the applications most likely to show up? Health. Health is very big in terms of getting information about people's health, collecting information about people's health, keeping in an organized fashion what the interventions in their health to improve their health are being done, so we make sure that there's not inconsistencies of treatment or duplications of treatment. So health is very important. Financial inclusion is another one. So these are where they did the survey of the 149. These are the activities. Health first, financial inclusion, and then a very big drop-off. So those are the 2 main spaces. Then you get to energy, climate, and the environment. And I found fascinating the mention earlier of the possible blockchain technology to link carbon emissions to carbon conversion. I think that sounds brilliant to me. There are then democracy and governance. The ones that have moved along the fastest, although they're not high in the survey in terms of projects, but they've moved along the fastest, democracy and government. And this is really giving people IDs. This is giving people IDs, giving refugees IDs, giving the homeless population. Now, we have a group of students in Berkeley now working on giving IDs to the homeless population in Oakland and San Francisco. Many of those people do not have IDs. They are also, a number of them are refugees, so you're doing a couple of things at once. So I think that digital identity is really important, and it's important for women around the world. Oftentimes women can't get access to basic services because they have no digital identity. The males do, and the women don't. Well, this is a great opportunity, it seems to me. So let me just go down another list. So the most likely applications within these sectors. So how is blockchain being used? For records and verification. So this is really where you have, in the supply chain with Walmart and IBM, or with your, registering your property so that it cannot be taken away from you by the next corrupt government to come along. So this, to me, is actually, it's not a surprise to hear that that's at the very top of the list. Then you get to payments and monetary transfer, that's second, and that's where I can see that you're kind of going back and forth between blockchain and fintech at that point. Another one is supply chain. So you mentioned the Walmart. There's, again, a student team at Cal's now working with a group of, it's working on supply chain of fish to Whole Foods. Okay, where's the fish coming from? Can you link to the smallest fisher situations around the world and get that copied and channeled and moved quickly through the blockchain. Another one is pharmaceuticals. There is a lot of bad stuff in the pharmaceutical chain. A lot of drugs that come in that are copied but not quite. A lot of defective drugs. So by the time the drug gets to the store, the supply chain could have possibly been interfered with. So those are just some examples. And then digital identity I already mentioned. So I find myself between the debate of it's going to do everything or it's going to do nothing. I am of the view that we seem to have a real possibility here of using an evolving technology alongside of other evolving technologies to try to address the SDGs, to try to help the world realize the SDGs. And one of the things, I'll end with this. I was in a room with a panel discussing the importance of private capital. What the private capital individuals said is they said they need measures, they need credible measures of impact. They need credible measures of impact. And blockchain, by these identifiable, consistent, non-corrupted flows of information, can help verify impact, and that will encourage more and more private capital to come in. So I am, at the end of the day, waiting for the evidence, but quite optimistic that blockchain can play those roles.
Thank you, Laura. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my background is a tech entrepreneur. Now I'm a member of parliament and legislator in Taiwan, focusing on developing progressive legislation and policies on crypto and blockchain. And I think Laura touched upon a wide range of things that blockchain can have potential impact on. I just want to focus on two things that Taiwan is now rolling out and developing. And this has a direct relation to SDG and the conversations we are having here. Number one is we have just announced a national EID system, which is basically to converge our social identity data and healthcare data, which we have 25-year worth of universal healthcare data, and converge them onto one blockchain ID.
Fantastic.
And build it so that we can provide the analytics and a big data study on the preventive medicine, and to ensure that our elderly or senior persons can get better care with this system. And another thing that we want to use on this EID system is much similar to what Tim has said about the Estonia's application. We are building what we call a Taiwan Global Id. If all of you here understand the complex situation Taiwan is facing concerning China's oppression on us, we are now down to 17 countries that has official diplomatic relationship with our country, my country. But we are developing this Taiwan Global ID so the global citizens, particularly skilled workers, can register as digital citizens of Taiwan. And with that, you can apply what we call a blockchain visa, where you can hire, make investments, and get all your documents done on this particular ID. So we are committed to making friends around the world with this particular global ID system. This is really symbolic to a borderless economy, or I think we are at a time in history where the political order and the political system needs to be rewritten. And it is through the intervention of technology, it is through the understanding of the interfacing of technology and public policy. And I want to give you a concrete example that we are working on with Yuan now. Now in Taiwan, there is a handset company, a brand called HTC, which has just launched the very first crypto phone. It is actually served as a digital wallet. You can use your phone to store different type of digital currencies, and you can do services with this phone. And now what we are doing is we are offering, with the help of Taiwan's hardware know-how, a very low-priced, but well-functioned digital wallet phone. And we are now shipping 50,000 crypto phones to refugees working with UN's World Food Program. And this is giving the refugees the dignity and giving them the legitimacy to be treated equal, and they can use this crypto phone to have access to finance and the provision of the food and the things that they need to get. So we are doing this by contributing our technology know-how. And also, I want to echo what Tim said about building trust,
airdrop,
transparency, and the free markets. These are the three things that we care deeply about. So in Taiwan, we are setting up a national center of excellence for blockchain. We've now identified 4 verticals that Taiwan has already have excellent strength on. These 4 verticals is blockchain plus medical. I've shared with our healthcare data, and blockchain with IoT and smart cities. We are very good with our IoT solutions. All the computer, electronics, Foxconn, they are all part of this. And number 3 is blockchain and agriculture. And it has to do with fishing, where Taiwan is an island, so we're trying to solve the overfishing issue by putting a record on blockchain. And lastly is financial inclusion. One of the things that we do is to provide micro loans to farmers in Southeast Asia, particularly those in Vietnam, who have Vietnam and Philippines, who have very or little access to bank loans because they don't have IDs. So we give them the digital ID, and then we work with the institutions in their own country and provide them with microloans, anywhere between $100 to $3,000. And surprisingly, we've now have 200,000 registered users, and with the 97.3% of payback in the last 6 months. So I think this is a lot of things that this group can achieve together. And certainly if we all come up with one idea and then work together, and by offering our strength, I think we will be at a better off place. And one last note, I am now focusing on developing the first STO regulatory framework in Asia. Taiwan will be coming out with the first STO regulatory framework in June. So because of the situation we face, we try to position ourselves as the digital asset hub in Asia. So over here, if you get a chance, we'd love to work with all of you and to help the world a better place. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Jason. By the way, LATOKEN would be happy to make some pilot security token offerings on your sandbox. Kate, how your firm works in emerging markets and how blockchain can help?
Yes. Well, first of all, I really apologize for my health right now. I've got the Davos bug, so I'll try to speak. I wear 2 hats. I represent a global health organization that works in 60 developing countries called Population Services International. And for the last 50 years, we've really been trying to help people at the bottom of the social economic pyramid have access to universal health care. And with this idea of blockchain, so my other hat is I co-founded Maverick Collective, which is a philanthropic group, only women. Not that we don't want the men, but women seem to, well, first of all, I'll tell you that trillions of dollars is being passed down to the next generation, and a large percentage of that group will be women. So we really reacted to this opportunity that there are solutions out there, like blockchain, that can really help civil society to get proof of concept around something that can financially empower people living at the bottom of the social economic pyramid. And of course, we all know that women, if we invest in women, we will strengthen local communities, nations, and therefore the world's economy. You know, investing in women is our way out of poverty and is a big part of the sustainable development goals that we've been talking about. The second thing I'll say, as somebody working in civil society, but also somebody working with the high net worths and investors around the world, blockchain needs a bit of a PR campaign, if you don't mind me saying so.
Yes.
It is so misunderstood. And I was here at Davos last year, and everyone was talking about blockchain as the new solution. And it's just not understandable to the people who implement on the ground, like us, who work with our beneficiary. We call her Sarah because she deserves a name. And Sarah, the reality is that Sarah lives with her family on $5 or less. And if we can financially empower her or give her access to these types of technologies, we need to develop that ecosystem. Sarah doesn't have a bank account. She doesn't have much wealth. She needs access to healthcare. And when she wants to go and buy her health products, she tends to go to the private sector to get those health services and products. One of the reasons I'm here this week is to try to solve the sanitation issue in India. Together with the World Economic Forum, we've started a program called After the Flush, because the Indian government have done a really good job of building toilets, because they realize that most people are openly defecating, especially women, which is leading to gender violence. It's leaving huge safety issues, and of course horrible sanitary conditions leading to disease. And of course India is a sixth of the world. And what we're really trying to do is build an ecosystem of waste management and treatment. Billions of liters of sludge is just being illegally dumped in India, and the solution is these sort of micro entrepreneurs who are currently digging out the septic tanks, putting it in a truck, and then illegally dumping it. And they need access to finance. These are mom and pop entrepreneurs who are at the lowest of the caste system in India, who have no access or cash flow to finance. And so blockchain, the way I understand it, could be a really interesting solution to empowering these entrepreneurs in the waste management system, for instance, to have that flow of capital, but also to be linked to the private sector. And then once we have proof of concept, because, again, the blockchain solution is being flashed around, but we really need to be realistic that we need to implement it, we need to prove it, and then we need to get the data, we need the measured results that we can then take to governments, we can take to the private sector, and then we can leverage those results to scale solutions. And I can't emphasize enough how important that is, because of the reality of who we're working with in the developing world. And then the last thing I'll say is behavior change. Do not underestimate how hard it is to change behavior in the developing world. We've been working for 50 years, around the issues of malaria and sanitation and HIV and family planning. And, this takes mass behavior change, especially with women, but also with men. Because they have to allow, women to have access to family planning. And it's taken us years to, get people to use condoms, get people to put a bed net to protect themselves from malaria. These are very simple solutions. But the answers do lie with collaboration, public-private partnerships, and also increasing the access to these health products and services. And again, people go to the private sector. They go and buy these services, and they often don't have access to the cash that they need. And so blockchain could be a very interesting solution, but we have to get down and dirty and start implementing and piloting to get the results that we need to be able to scale.
Can I just ask, in the Taiwan example where you're giving IDs, it sounds like you're giving IDs to exactly the kind of population you're talking about. So what I noticed in what you said was you work with them on the ID. That's a blockchain application. But you're not giving them credit through that. They are then working with their local organizations on transactions and credit. So in a sense, blockchain itself, unless you go to the notion of airdrop, you're going to give people aid through the phone. Okay, you give people aid through the phone. That. But some of this stuff is really identifying people, so they then have the ability to go and link to the existing.
So just to build off that, understanding Sarah, who lives in, usually a slum dwelling. She might be urban, she might be rural. Understanding her behavior, and then taking a small amount of Sarah's and using user-centered design, putting Sarah at the center of some of these ideas and innovations, testing it out in various markets, and then really looking at, is this even possible? I feel that the technologists, the brilliant minds that we have, are almost making it too complicated for us to be able to implement it and realistically get the data and the behavior change we need to take this to scale. But we are desperate, and if we're going to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, this has to be easier to deliver to the markets. And
can you provide a simple example how we can help Sarah with blockchain?
Yeah,
what do you have in
yeah,
mind?
yeah,
You keep referring to it, but you
Yeah.
probably have something in mind, but you...
Well, no, I do. First of all, I think you have to take the NGOs and the people on the ground who've been working with Sarah a little bit more seriously, because most of the world lives in poverty. Most of the world doesn't have a smartphone. They still have a flip phone, and sometimes they share that phone, with their village. And we, these brilliant people have come in with these ideas, and that, we're not quite there yet to be able to get the information we need. So I think it's the time that we really effectively collaborate, and we identify large-scale implementers on the ground, and join forces with organizations like Salesforce and entrepreneurs, technologists who really understand these issues, and then work together on the ground with the Sarahs so that we can find solutions that work for her and Sam. That we can then, measure it. I mean, this waste management ecosystem in India, for instance, just focusing on India with 1.3 billion people, 2/3 of the waste is not being treated and managed. But the solution is in the small entrepreneurs. And
I think we all agree, and I think one of the challenges, and it's going to be a challenge for the philanthropic organizations. Is to try to figure out how to use this particular technology to help solve that problem. Because we have seen, and again, I think M-Pesa is just a fabulous example of, actually, most of the highly disadvantaged population in Kenya have access and have it through M-Pesa.
Yeah, and it's growing.
It's changed the way they behave. It changes their transactions, it changes their savings, it changes their it changes everything.
Access to markets.
Right. So I just think we working on this, whether we're policymakers or companies or philanthropies, have to ask ourselves what's the role of this particular technology. Think of blockchain as a particular technology. A really great thing that happened this week was the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth and the Rockefeller Foundation introduced a significant new grant funding mechanism. It's really meant to help measure and therefore encourage private investment and philanthropic investment in impact in SDGs. And they are going to look carefully at how can we deploy blockchain in that.
Yeah. Can I just add to that? So there is no shortage of money. The USAID, the Global Fund, the bilateral donors have been putting billions and billions and billions of dollars towards aid. And what they are saying is we need new solutions, right? The aid money is going to run out. And so I think there is a really interesting role for the private philanthropist on this issue to, invest small amounts of philanthropic capital to test out these ideas so that then we can take the solutions to the traditional donors, but also help make this a sustainable solution that won't need aid. It will replace the need for aid. And so I feel like, with Maverick Collective, we have donors, individual donors coming to us all the time saying, tell us what we can invest in for great impact. And so
Yes,
I
they
think
do.
there is a real opportunity there to
They
work
do.
with this private capital, great minds, great technologists, to implement this on the ground and prove the concept.
If I may jump on what you just said.
Yeah.
So I used to trade the SSA bonds at JP Morgan. I used to trade the EBRD bonds.
Oh, wow.
And I know exactly how
Okay.
these bonds are structured,
Right.
where the proceed goes, and where the errors are made.
Okay.
Now I'm building an ecosystem that supposedly and hopefully will replace capital markets in 15 years. Now I'm going to lead with a question to the public and ask you, who of you have read Isaac Asimov Foundation Cycle? More of you should read it because it's very, very relevant at the moment.
What is it? again?
Foundation cycle.
Foundation cycle.
And I'll tell you why it's relevant, because we're talking about disruptions. Everyone here talks about AI, talks about decentralization, but we're forgetting a very, very important component, and it's collective intelligence and community. And I will tell you why. What I've learned through ICOs is that there is a real community of people that are helping one another, that want to help one another, and that are leveraging on the knowledge, on the experience of each other's to make better decisions. So why is that important? It is important because the end goal of a society is to reach a state of equilibrium. However, equilibrium means wealth and peace. But to reach a stage of wealth and peace, we need more and more money, right? Now, the current form of capitalism that we have is skewed and is wrong, because money begets money, meaning that people who have more money can get a loan from a bank much easier than people who have less money or who have no money. It goes back, same thing with companies. Companies who have money can issue more debt or can IPO easier. And same thing with countries. Countries with more money can issue more debt and leverage on this. Now, the issue with poverty is that poverty creates social tensions, and these social tensions create social instabilities, and these social instabilities create revolutions and create wars. And this is very, very important for SMEs, especially in emerging and frontier markets. But the very interesting thing that we're facing nowadays is that it's not only emerging and frontier markets that are having social instabilities. It's developed markets that are having social instabilities. And one of the reasons is probably the fact that we never really recovered from the financial crisis of 2008. My parents were richer than I am today, right? And add to this social media, when you see people flaunting their wealth with their helicopters, when you see some students that have tons of students that can't find a job, it creates anger and angst. And this has been translated, Trumpism in the US, Brexit in the UK, Gilets jaunes in France. So how can we resolve this now? To resolve this, we need to empower entrepreneurs with smart money.
Yeah.
And this is where I have a big critic towards what the EBRD, IBRD, IFC have been doing, is that the money they've been investing is stupid money. It is stupid money. Why?
I disagree.
Yeah, I think, yeah,
I will tell you.
calling names.
I will tell you. The percentage of projects that are successful, and you will tell me, how many projects are successful 5 years in?
I can tell you. I'm in charge of methodology of measuring impact.
Yes.
And on average, we deliver higher exposed impact than we thought ex ante. Not much higher, pretty much the same. But percentage of projects which outperform in terms of impact is the same as percentage of projects that underperform.
Okay.
So on average, we deliver what we promise our shareholders. And we have a very robust methodology of measuring expected impact ex ante and measuring it every year, checking which benchmarks are met, which benchmarks have been not successful. And so we take it very seriously. And here I fully agree with Laura. Whenever we talk to impact investors, they say, if we want to invest with you, we want to understand what the impact is. And that's the problem which can be addressed by blockchain, helping to measure impact. That's why I talked about green bonds, for example.
Yeah, that was a great example.
Greenwashing
That
is
was
a
a great
big
example.
problem. You mentioned the bonds, right? And the waste management. you come to recycling plant and you say, this is legal, and this is where blockchain can check whether it's legal or illegal waste management, right? And this is extremely important, because then once you have robust certification, verification methodology in place, you can bring in private money.
Yeah.
One number which I wanted to mention is, what is the amount of impact investors' assets under management today? Talking about billions or trillions agenda. Unfortunately, we are talking about something like $200 or $300 billion assets under management.
Assets.
So we are still in the early days, not near what we want to be when we talk about delivery on SDGs. Yeah.
But do you know what the failure rate, that's what I'm interested in. If you tell me what is the failure rate of the companies that the EBRD, IFC, IBRD have invested in, the failure rate is higher than 50%.
What's the source?
That's business.
No.
Yeah, we invest in
But-
small companies.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I agree, but
Only
we can do it better, and I will tell you how we can do it.
Okay.
So we've been talking about decentralization.
We are a risk-taking organization, right? I think it's very important. There are some other institutions. You mentioned IBRD. IBRD is actually very different from
Yeah, they don't take
IFC and IBRD.
No.
So there are some institutions which don't take risks.
Right.
We have much higher risk appetite, and we are proud of this because we can co-invest with venture capital. We can co-invest with private equity, and we can take risk, and therefore we are prepared to fail. And we do fail. In some countries, we make major losses, but our portfolio is diversified, so overall we deliver both on financial and on impact.
Well, so let's hear how do you say we'll improve? Yeah.
So we are building something that we call smart money investment.
Okay.
So smart money investment means that if you're a company, if you're an SME in emerging market or an SME in Italy or in Spain, you come to the ecosystem. The ecosystem will rate you automatically because it has like a machine learning AI system.
It's using all data about you.
It's using all the data that it can find.
So that's what
about you,
PayPal does in the US.
about the industry,
That's
about the people that are working with you, about your financial,
Everything.
etc.
Everything they can
And
find.
it comes up with a score. But this is not the important part.
Right, okay.
The important part, and the part that I believe is really going to make a difference, is once you are on the ecosystem, the community gets involved.
Yeah.
So the community starts doing exactly like the pools in Telegram, right? Community starts speaking to you. The community start asking you questions. The community start looking at your project and telling you, well, I don't know, you want to open an ice cream factory in Portugal. I am an ice cream factory in Italy. You want to buy this machine? Bad idea.
Yes.
You better buy this machine, etc., etc.
Fair
So it is this exchange of knowledge
that makes sense.
that leads to a project
Yeah.
which will be agreed on by the investors and by the company and will lead to a vote. So you will have the investors that will need to vote and decide on whether to issue a bond, to issue equity, or not to issue anything at all if they don't like the project.
Or do you prevent fake information on your platform?
That would be, yes, blockchain would be very good there.
That'll be
You cannot have fake information because the AI system looks at everything on the internet, number one. For the SMEs, we will have people in place to check the correctness, the truth of the papers that they have. Because this is a problem with the blockchain, especially when we talk about real assets, is it real at the beginning, right? Is it real at the beginning? And this is why we speak with people like you, because you already have the teams on the ground that can do this third-party check and tell us, yes, these financials are correct, or no, these financials are not correct. But now when we get to the voting part, and this is where it's very, very interesting, is that your vote will not be equivalent to my vote. Why? Because you're a legal specialist. Let's say I'm an ice cream specialist. My vote is going to have a higher value than your vote because I know this business better than you, right? But it's not only that. My weight on the platform is going to evolve through time based
liquid
on
democracy.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Collective
Liquid
intelligence.
democracy, I haven't heard that term. That's
So,
good.
we have a final panel to discuss how to bring into reality this decentralized financial system. I will give you the award. So how to manage this financial system. So we should kind of speed up. What are your thoughts, Yonathan?
Thank you. So maybe we have a microphone or, yeah. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I think first of all, the great things we had today is a real, like dialogue, and dialogue means, to have different point of view. If we want, to make blockchain industry something that will be sustainable, we need as well to engage in discussion with people that have experience and don't think like us. We have to remember a simple fact for people that know and like a little bit history like I do. It's all the major breakthrough for humanity have always had great reluctancy by the established order. So if we will not had, like the daring and the passion and the dreams, we will never, be flying, not to the moon, not to the space, not underwater. And so if we are here with those technologies surrounding us, it's because some people have been risk taker, believer in humanity and in its ability as well of adopting those technologies or those changes. So that's the first statement. The second statement is we are very lucky. There is hope. Why? Because 193 nations have agreed on an agenda which is not a short-term agenda, which is, plaguing all our, like current economy, on a long-term agenda, 2030 objectives, 17 goals, the SDGs. Those goals are there, like a roadmap for all of us to build projects and innovations and to build up PPP, public-private partnerships. We cannot do it alone, but if we work together, we are capable to find and build the solutions of tomorrow. So now let's go concrete. How can we solve the problem of inclusion? Because that's basically what is at stake. How can we bring, the aspect of inclusion for the millions of people that have their dreams, but that are lacking, like banking account or funding? There is, like lots of things to achieve. They have great ideas, but how can we identify them? So I come from finance. I've been working, and I'm happy to know that there are some ex-colleagues, from JP Morgan. I worked as well at Bank of China, at Julius Baer. I learned so much from them, but I learned as well that in 2008, 2009, we are capable as well to really put ourselves to the knee because of speculation. So the speculation that we are, putting forward for blockchain and cryptocurrency, well, I can tell you we have the same current speculation with a much more sizable aspect for, like the current financial market. So that's, like a given for all the aspect of innovation. There is speculation. But how can we transform the energy from speculation to real investment? And that's where we need, the purpose. So what I built a social network for social good. Why? Because the people of our generation, younger generation, they are exchanging daily their informations. So we need to interact with them and give them a way for them to share about what they feel and how they connect and resonate with the SDGs. What are their projects? What are their positive actions? All of this is capable to embrace everyone. Everyone has a cause that is dear to our heart. So the first thing is we have to facilitate the connectivity on social media, but for good, for something meaningful. So we have already 300,000 members in 180 countries, and that has been developed organically by going on the ground, meeting the people that want to make the world better. But when we meet them, they have great ideas, but they are lacking the funds. The funds doesn't channel to them. So how can we bring the dimension of impact? And that's where blockchain is a miracle. Let's call it like this. I created first a digital currency, but that digital currency was not crypto. It was not decentralized. It was purely on the network. It don't work. It cannot work. Why? Because we need the traceability and the decentralization. So I learned from that by meeting, like so many, like people that are what we call the Forbes, 500, and they will slap me, in my shoulder and say, that's a great project, but they didn't move. Why? Because we have a problem in the aspect of giving. Many reasons for that. Some people say, I don't want to give because, I cannot trust, I cannot have the trustability, I cannot measure the impact, I need to do proper due diligence, all those things. So hundreds of reasons not to give. The first thing is we really own what we give because no one can take it back from us. That's the first, principle, philosophical principle that is, like the driving of everything that has been built in the Renaissance and in many, a period of human history that was, like on the Enlightenment aspect. So we develop a cryptocurrency a utility token, which is called Horyou token. That token is very simple. On every transaction, there is a small percentage, we call it, proof of impact, like a VAT, from 0.01% to 0.1%. On every transaction on the blockchain on Ethereum, that percentage goes to the cause that you want to support. It goes to a foundation in Switzerland, and that foundation gives it back 100% to the most active users of our social network that are plebiscited by a worldwide community of social good doers. And on all of them, we ask them only few information. One of them is, which of the SDG do you feel the most connected? So imagine a world where we build social network not to extract from you data to sell it when you don't know. But imagine a world where we have social networks that connect for good and that are capable to support the people that are the change makers of tomorrow, that are making the change, and that are plebiscited by us, the people. And that's where it gets, to a new dimension. Because if we have, on the billions of transactions that happen every day, a very tiny percentage that can flow to the people that are the breakthrough, the thinkers, the dreamers, those people have the solutions on their local, places, geographies, and those people want to embrace a world where they have a ownership for them and for generations to come. So let's be hopeful. Let's build those partnerships. Let's consider blockchain as a real breakthrough technology, as it was said, like for internet. But we have to bring the dimension of purpose. We have to bring the dimension of solving issues. And if we work all together, yes, we can live a moment where a world can be more harmonious and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.